workshop one more time. The greatest part of writer's time is spent in reading. In order to write, a man will turn over half a library to make one book, said by Samuel Johnson. However, today we are fortunate enough having an opportunity to learn from the experts how not to turn half a library to write one paper. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second day of the third international conference on enterprise and entrepreneurialism in tourism and hospitality, organized by the Department of Tourism and Hospitality Management, Jamia, Millia, Islamia, New Delhi, India. The conference is supported by Ministry of Tourism, Government of India, celebrating 75 years of independence, Azadi Ka Amrit Utsav. So we have structured the workshop wherein first both of our speakers would be delivering their keynote address, one after another. And post the keynote address, we would be taking the questions for the experts from our audience towards the end. Once again, hearty welcome to the workshop on publishing in high quality journal. Before beginning the session, I take the liberty and pleasure to introduce our first expert of the session, Professor Dimitros Buhalis. Professor Buhalis is a strategic management and marketing expert with a specialization in information communication technology, smart environment, and interactive marketing. He is an expert in technology applications in the tourism, travel, hospitality, and leisure industry. He is a professor of smart tourism at Bournemouth University Business School. He is currently visiting professor at the School of Hospitality and Tourism Management, the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. He is the editor-in-chief of the most established journal in tourism, Tourism Review. He is also the editor of the Encyclopedia of Tourism Management and Marketing. Professor Buhalis' research is referenced widely, being the second most cited for tourism and first most cited for hospitality, 18th on strategy, and 30th in marketing on Google Scholar with more than 53,000 citations and H index of 100. He has taught in more than 50 universities around the world and delivers more than 30 keynotes per year. Professor Buhalis is a founding member and past president of the International Federation of Information and Technologies in Travel and Tourism. He served as the first vice president of the International Academy for the Study of Tourism and as executive board member of the United Nations World Tourism Organization, affiliate members from 2013, 15, 17 to 19. Professor Dimitros' current research focus includes real-time and nowness, smart tourism and smart hospitality, social media context and mobile marketing, augmented reality, technology-enhanced experience management and personalization, reputation, social media strategies, accessibility, and special diet. Professor Buhalis is a well-known international speaker on trends, technology, marketing, tourism, and hospitality. He is an inspirational forward thinker that undertakes cutting-edge research, develops innovations, and makes a major impact on the global society. I humbly request Dr. Sarah Hussain, head of the Department of Tourism and Hospitality Management, Jamia Millia Islamia, also the conference chair, to cordially welcome Professor Buhalis for his keynote address. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Rohan. I would like to welcome both our guests, Professor Buhalis and Professor Andriotis. You're very warmly welcome to the Department of Tourism and Hospitality Management for this third international conference on enterprise and entrepreneurialism in tourism and hospitality. I'm also very thankful to you for agreeing to be a part of this conference, even though we have very, very different time zones. Your achievements, accomplishments, and research have made you most sought after and cited names for tourism and hospitality research. So not wasting any more time, as everyone here is very eager to listen to you and you alone. Over to you, Rohan, our Senior Research Fellow and moderator for this panel discussion.
Thank you, ma'am. Professor Buhalis, you may please begin with your keynote address first.
Thank you very much for your kind words. Couple of things. First, it's great to be with you. And obviously, India is developing so fast, and we're very keen to bring the Indian scholars to the mainstream of publications and research, and engage especially on entrepreneurship and in tourism and hospitality, because it's such an important field all over the world. Now, I've got to correct you a couple of things. Google Scholar, for some reason, stole 7,000 citations from me. So I'm and about 7 points on the AIDS index. So I'm now I've just crossed the line second time, more than 50,000, and I'm on 97. And the other thing is because of the time zone, I'll need to leave at about 5 o'clock your time, 7:30 here, because I've got a dinner appointment which I cannot avoid. So I'll take a few questions afterwards, and then I'll probably have to disappear because it's getting quite late in Hong Kong. Okay. So let me see if I can share my presentation, and then we can see what we can do. I don't know if you can see the presentation. Can you see the first slide?
It's visible, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So what I'll be talking about is how do you publish in top SSCI journals, and how do you get recognition for your work? Obviously, a lot of the things that I'm talking about are related to my journal, the Tourism Review. Tourism Review is the most established journal in tourism and hospitality. It has been published in 1946, and we are on our 77th year of publications. I'm not 77 years old yet. I took over the journal at the end of 2016, and since then you'll see what's happening. At the same time, I'm the editor-in-chief of the Encyclopedia of Tourism Management and Marketing, and we're completing that project in August 2022. So those two things, those two major works, inform the presentation that we're doing. Now, you can see the growth of Tourism Review over the last few years, and you can see that the impact factor has grown from 1.06 in 2018 to 2.9 in 2019 and 5.9 in 2020. I'm looking forward to receive the 2021 impact factor, and you can see that the size score increased from 2.1 in 2019 to 4.5 in 2020, and currently in January 2022 we're on 7.7. And as far as the encyclopedia is concerned, we got 1,250 entries contributed by 1,500 scholars from around the world, and you can see already 750 of those online on these addresses. So one of the important things is what we're doing for the journal. And you can see the journal growing very, very rapidly, partly because it addresses a whole range of issues on tourism, obviously including entrepreneurship, management, marketing, and anything to do with this kind of area, but also elements with policy, governance, community, stakeholders, technology, the entire range. We're very privileged to have a journal that can actually take anything that has got to do with tourism and to provide a comprehensive kind of coverage to this area. Now you can see the growth here and how the journal has been growing the last few years. And you can see not only the growth in impact factor, but you can also see the growth in articles. When I took over, we were publishing 21 articles per year in 2016. In 2017, we published 29. So now we're publishing 80 articles per year. In 2020, it was our 75 years. So we did an anniversary issue with 75 seminal papers. But normally we'll publish about 80 papers per year. And you can see the impact factors and the citations. A lot of people are asking me, why has the journal become so successful, and why have we been developing so fast in the last 4 or 5 years? And I normally say I've been following the same principles that I've been following in all my career, on all my research career. And it's not anything really secret or anything really different, but We're publishing research that's cutting edge. It's really fresh and up to date. It's very relevant to the tourism ecosystem in terms of business and entrepreneurs, and also destinations and macro levels. And then you've got consumers and how consumers and consumer behavior is changing in the last few years. So if we are focusing on those things, and obviously sustainability is coming to destinations, and we're looking into a range of papers that are very impactful and create benefits. As I said, when you're doing research on tourism, you really need to think about what's happening in tourism and what happens in destinations. So this is Delphi in Greece, and I'm actually very glad to share this session with Kostas Konstantinos, who is another fellow Greek. So we'll show you a little bit of Greece to show you how is actually the research that you are doing is impacting destinations. Everything we do has got to have an impact to the ecosystem. It needs to create benefit to something, and this is what we do. Now, this summer I was privileged to visit a small island called Naxos in Greece, and you can see on top here the Apollo, the temple to God Apollo. And I went there to actually conclude the encyclopedia, because you can see that this is exactly what it is on the cover of the encyclopedia. And it, when you're spending time on destinations, the question is, how does your research impact people? And I spent quite a lot of time with the mayor of Naxos, having this conversation, looking to how can we actually take the research forward and support the destination. And that has been all my career, and that's why a lot of the papers I've done, they've been growing. And that you can see on Tourism Review and how it has been growing in the last few years. You can see that a lot of countries are downloading from the Tourism Review, mainly China, United Kingdom, Australia, Malaysia, Indonesia, Turkey, Germany, United States, Thailand, and Austria. But we don't see India participating so much on this. And although we are receiving quite a lot of papers from India, I don't think that India is studying tourism review to the same extent, and therefore quite a lot of papers that we are receiving from India are desk rejected because people do not understand what is required. And I think that is one of the giveaways, really. You really need to understand what the journals are doing, what are they producing, before you can send papers in. And I think India needs to improve the access to this knowledge, and Indian academics need to actually understand a little bit better what the journal is about and how they can publish. And again, you can see here, as soon as the journal became an SSCI, you can see what's happening with China, because Chinese scholars jumped into the opportunity to publish in an SSCI journal, and we get many more papers, and we get more authors coming from China than before. And you can see the growth in a year. So any editor will have as an objective to get the best research papers. We're really looking for the golden egg, and we're looking to how can we approach the authors and how we can support the authors to make sure that they're sending us the most bright ideas. The ideas that they'll stand up, the ideas that they're cutting edge, the ideas that they'll make a huge impact in the marketplace. So this is the main consideration of most of the editors. I'm working very closely with Kathy Su, who is the editor of Tourism Management, and with Sarah Doniger and Scott, who are the authors of Annals of Tourism Research, we are all trying to find the best papers, and we're trying to attract them to our journals. And we're competing for that. Equally, when you meet researchers, they say, I must publish 3 papers per year, and ideally, I really want to publish in an SSCI journal. But when you're asking them, which journal do you like to publish in, and how would you like to target the journals, how can you develop your knowledge on this, quite often they are not very knowledgeable about the journals and how they can target the journal, how they can be successful. So I see a lot of people wasting a lot of time and getting really disappointed and spending a lot of time because they don't read the journal. So if you're not reading the journal, what's going to happen is that you're going to send a paper that is not meeting the criteria, and quite often it's going to get rejected, or if it goes to review, it may get rejected later on. To give you an understanding of what's happening, 65% of the papers that are submitted to tourism review, 65 get rejected, desk rejected, so they never go to reviewers. And then there's another 20% that they are rejected on first review. So it really is competitive, and you really need to understand what the journal is about and how you can do the best papers. So in order to do that, you really need to read the journal that you like to publish. You really need to understand what are the latest papers that they are published in the journal, and have you actually engaged with them? Do you discuss the papers that they are published? Do you reference the papers that are published? And do you review for the journal? I think those are some very important factors that will enable any researcher to actually publish in a journal. So unless you are actually part of the community, it's quite difficult to publish. Quite often you find people that they are looking for a rapid publication, and quite often they pay for it. In some of these, paying for some of the journals where you pay to get your publication published. But few people really want to do the hard work and solve a valid problem. And I think that is really what does good research. Good research is always about looking to addressing valid problems and engaging with academia and industry to create valuable kind of contributions and publish very serious issues. To get published, you need to understand the publishing process. You need to write brilliant papers. You need to doing refereeing. You need to deal with the referees' reports, and you need to be very, very careful on how you're addressing the comments of the referees, and you need to look into how you can address success factors. Quite often, people fail to understand what's a good paper and what is not a good paper. And I think with experience, people learn how to do this, but you really need to work with senior colleagues from around the world to understand actually what is a good paper and how can you get published. A good paper makes a contribution to theory and to practice. Theory is primarily universal truths, and it's applied across many contexts. A lot of the papers I get from India are things that are relating only to the context of India, or even a very small place in India. Typically, I'll get a lot of papers about rural tourism in India and a particular community that something happened. Tourism Review will never publish papers like that. Tourism Review publish papers where they've got an impact globally. So typically I'll ask you, how is what you're doing have an impact on Sao Paulo in Brazil, Aveiro in Portugal, Adana in Turkey, Yogyakarta in Indonesia. So it's really what is the generalizability of your research, and how can your context applies to different kind of places. That's really, really important on what do we do. Now, I'll show you some of the confidential kind of story, the inside story, so you can understand a little bit the process of publishing. So the refereeing process, we really need to have 2 or 3 referees. Now, increasingly, we're asking for 4 referees on tourism review. typically the editorial board members, but also other scholars that have published in this area. We're looking to who has published papers on this area, and we look into the Web of Science, we look into Google Scholar to identify experts on the area. Referees are crucial to the quality control, and they are developing a range of different suggestions that they can improve the paper. Referees are not always right, but they usually are. And quite often we have 4 referees or more sometimes, where we're looking to their opinion and how and explore how your paper can actually improve. In order to understand how journals operate, you need to make yourself a referee on journals that you would like to publish. So if you like to publish in Tourism Review, you need to volunteer your services to Tourism Review, because again, you'll be part of the community and you'll understand how the community operates. I think this is a very important graph that a lot of people don't realize how it works. So when you submit something, it goes into this kind of area where you can either, the editor will either accept it to be reviewed and gonna send it to referees, or reject it totally, or reject and ask to resubmit it. So typically for Tourism Review, this is 65% of the papers we get. This is about 5 to 10%, and this is the rest is going to refereeing. Now, when you get the results of the refereeing, you can either reject the paper at this stage, or you can ask the authors for more reviews, more revisions. Once you've got the revisions, you can reject the revisions, or you are going on to this kind of loop where you are sending the papers to reviewers and you're asking for their opinions until 2 things happen. You either accept the paper or reject the paper. Now, the acceptance rate of Tourism Review is about between 10 and 12%, depending on the year. Okay, so this is how it works. Now, what's really critical is that you really need to do this quite quickly, because you hear all these horror stories of people who have been stuck in a journal for more than a year and they do not have an answer. So you really need the editors to be very active and to provide an answer, whether it's a positive or a negative answer. So what you can do is you can improve the paper or find a paper that's more suitable, find a journal that's more suitable for your paper. But what you don't want is the papers, the editor sitting on the paper for more than 2 months. In Tourism Review, the average reviewing time is 32 days. So the desk rejection is within probably 4 or 5 days maximum. And then the average reviewing time is about 32 days. So, and also we've got about normally 3 to 4 revisions. So hopefully within 4 to 5 months, if the authors are working hard, we can have an acceptance. If the paper is good and the authors are working hard with it. You need to be patient with the editors, because most of the editors I know, they teach, they research, they write papers, they do administration, they manage departments, they are mentoring students and other staff, they publish, they supervise PhDs, they travel, they deliver keynotes, all of those things that we all do. So this is a typical kind of situation that I'm going to wake up to, where I'll have to make about 10 decisions based on what has arrived overnight from Tourism Review. And that's why we say the editor never sleeps, because we're constantly engaging in this kind of game. This is in Gatwick Airport when we're traveling, where I was going to Australia, and before I arrived there, I found about in 24 hours, I found more than 15 papers that I had to deal with. So to kind of conclude, you really need to download the Tourism Review regularly and read regularly. Ask your students to read as well, review papers, submit your papers, and support the journal so you can engage with the journal. We've got the call for papers for the Agenda 2030 because 2030 is only 8 years away, and we're going to focus on the Sustainable Development Goals. But this is not only about sustainability, but it's really about the future of tourism. It's all about anything that is doing that we will be doing in order to progress tourism to the next stage. So that's it from me. Apologies, I went very quickly. Apologies to Kostas because I need to leave, but I've got another 5 or so minutes to take questions if you've got enough questions.
Sir, I'm not at all surprised that your keynote brought new insights about writing good research and publishing in high quality journals. You always motivate us, and I hope you will keep enlightening us with your expertise even in future. However, I have a very interesting question for you. This is from again the Tourism Review, which I've just been through. Sir, Tourism Review also publishes papers that have a certain perspective, also known as perspective papers, as well as cutting edge research from the contemporary topics that could be carved from the PhD research topics. Over here in India, I believe traditional papers and these type of papers, people usually get confused while approaching them. So my question to you is, what makes them different from the traditional style of writing a research paper, and how to approach them?
Okay, the perspective paper was particularly relevant when we did the 75 years because we primarily invited very senior authors from around the world to look into their perspective, and they are very short papers. We still have the category open, so people can still submit papers for that, but they really need to be cutting edge papers, and they need to be very, very strong opinions. The perspective papers. The cutting edge papers are primarily literature reviews, and sometimes, we don't discriminate whether they are PhD students or senior professors. The reviewers do not know who is actually submitting papers. And quite often, sometimes even the PhD students have got more interesting things to say than senior professors. So we are not discriminating on we're just looking the paper in black and white, and that's what's assessed. So the cutting edge papers are primarily literature reviews, but critical literature reviews. I mean, a lot of journals now are receiving papers, bibliographical kind of papers, which are statistical analysis basically, and the exercises where authors are counting how many papers have been published, where they have been published from, which universities are the leading university, which authors are the leading authors. This is very descriptive kind of stuff that we've been seeing. So the cutting edge is really about summarizing knowledge and creating the conceptual frameworks to take us forward. And that's what cutting edge papers are for in Tourism Review.
Thank you for the answer, sir. One more question that I would be asking you, and it's a common question I would also be asking to Professor Konstantinos later on. But sir, you might be receiving a lot of papers from the Indian community of researchers or the Tourism Review Journal. So can you just let us know what are the major and common shortcomings or lackings that you find? And a lot of researchers are also listening to you right now. How we can improve them?
I think you're absolutely right. We get a lot of papers from India, and most of them are desk rejected. because most of them are contextual based. So they're talking about what they call the village of my mother. You know, a particular community is dealing with a particular problem. And when you're having a very contextual paper, the advice always is publish it in an Indian journal. I'm not going to publish something on Tourism Review of something that is done in India, based on India sample, and only applies into India. Having said that, you need to turn that around. Look at the phenomenon and look at what are you actually researching and see whether you can do the research in India to create best practice, best knowledge that can be applied to different places. And always, you know, in all the texts that are coming out from Tourism Review, there's this paragraph that says, okay, how is your research relevant to other places? How is your research relevant to Brazil, to Indonesia, to Egypt, to Finland? And that is really, really important as far as Tourism Review is concerned. You really need to look into what are you publishing, what are you researching. There are some things that will be unique to India. I don't know. Let's say human resource in travel, right? It may be unique because of different things, but you really need to go back into the theory and say how can you develop the theory and how can you manage to bring knowledge out of India that can apply to other places. And I think that is really the biggest shortcoming. The second thing is really a lot of scholars are really in a hurry to publish, so they don't do the homework. So if you have not included papers that have been published in the last 2 or 3 years, it means that you do not know where science is going. You do not know what is required, and you do not know who has been addressing these issues. So what is your contribution needs to be based on the knowledge that we have got already. But if you do not know that knowledge, there's no way that you can actually do good research. And the last thing that all the editors, we get together and we all complain is sloppy authorship. You know, badly written papers that they're not following the guidelines of the journals. The English needs to be improved, and I know that's a pain, and it happens to me as well. You know, as an author, it's so painful to do all that. I spend an hour today trying to submit a paper to a leading journal, and I couldn't. Their system was not allowing me to do so. But this is the kind of stuff that we have to do. So we really need to improve the generalizability, so the ability of actually creating knowledge out of India or any other place that can be useful into theory and other places. We need to be cutting edge, we need to know contemporary knowledge, and we need to have carefully curated, carefully edited papers that can be useful, that they can be published without major problems.
Thank you so much, Professor Buhalis. I guess considering your time limitations and with your brilliant presentation that we had experienced today, I really thank you from the bottom of my heart on behalf of Department of Tourism and Hospitality Management for your valuable time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With apologies to Costa, I wish you well and hopefully we'll meet soon. Bye-bye.
All right, let's move ahead in our workshop today. I feel humble with the presence of Professor Konstantinos Andriotis, who would be sharing his wisdom as the expert of the session. Before welcoming him for his keynote address, I take the liberty to introduce Professor Andriotis with you all. Dr. Andriotis is a professor in tourism at Middlesex University, London, and in the past, he was an associate professor and head of the Hotel and Tourism Management Department at the Cyprus University of Technology. He holds an MSc in International Hospitality Management from University of Strathclyde in the year 1995, a PhD in Tourism Development and Planning from Bournemouth University in the year 2000, and a postdoc in Tourism Marketing from Hellenic University in the year 2006. He edits the International Journal of Tourism Policy, the Journal of Qualitative Research in Tourism, and the book series, CABI Regional Tourism Series. He is member of the editorial board of more than 20 journals. He is the author of 7 books and over 50 peer-reviewed articles and book chapters. His work has appeared in leading academic journals, including Annals of Tourism Research, Journal of Travel Research, Tourism Management, and Journal of Sustainable Tourism. He has an H index of 33 and more than 4,700 citations. He was listed in the Stanford University list of top 2% scientists in the world. He has acted as chairman and member of the organizing and scientific committees of various international conferences, and he has been giving keynote speeches in several conferences. His research interests include tourism development and planning, alternative form of tourism, tourism experience, and degrowth. Sir has also been with us today since morning, and I really thank you for that, Professor Konstantinos. And now I humbly request Dr. Sarah Hussain, Head of the Department of Tourism and Hospitality Management, Jamia Millia Islamia, also the conference chair, to cordially welcome Professor Konstantinos Andriotis for his keynote address. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Professor Andriotis. Like Rohan said, we could see you since morning, and it gives us so much pleasure that you found this conference useful, and your presence has motivated the scholars, young scholars, especially of our department and people that we know. And we look forward to hearing from you about how to get published in a good journal. And I hope after today's workshop, the publications from India should improve. So thank you so much. Over to you, Professor.
So hello to everybody from Greece, where we have a very heavy winter this year. So I'm sitting next to my heater. At first, I would like to thank you for the invitation. I attended various workshops. I heard several speeches, and I would like to congratulate you for the very good organization of the conference. So now I'm going to share my slides. Do I do something wrong? Okay, I think that.
It's visible, Professor.
Okay, that's good. So the most part of my presentation is based on editing of 2 journals. The International Journal of Tourism Policy, that is 15 years old. I established it myself 15 years old. And the Journal of Qualitative Research in Tourism, which is a new journal. It's around 2 years old. Also, I'm editing the CABI Regional Tourism Series. We've already published 2 books. And this year, we're going to have 4 more books. Of course, a lot of my experience is also from being associate editor of Annals of Tourism Research, where I was an associate editor for many years, and as a writer in tourism journals, reviewer, and so on. When I've seen the program, and I've seen that Professor Buhalis was one of the speakers, keynote speakers, who was going to give a speech related with the same topic with mine, I was a bit worried, because I've said that since I'm second, I might recite what he said. But now that I've heard his speech, I'm quite happy, because I have a different approach to my presentation. I'm not going to say much about any specific journal, and a lot of the most part of my presentation is going to be about the structure of manuscript. Of course, I'm going to say some things about the publication process, the review process, and problems of manuscripts. So the structure that usually papers in academic journals have is the following ones. You start always with the title, a short abstract, introduction, literature review, materials and methods, results and discussion, references, and of course at the end, you include your figures and tables. I'm going to analyze each of these sections one by one, starting with the title. A slightly unusual title combined with a descriptive subtitle might attract interest and make the paper memorable. So the main criteria that you need with your title is to be descriptive and short. My supervisor used to say that the title should be less than 16 words. The best idea when you want to write your title is about the word count. It's to see the papers that have been already published and how many words they have. Sometimes I like to include the methodology I adopted in the paper, but I'm doing it only if it's unusual, if it's unique. So you can see that one paper that I published in Annals, the subtitle was a phenomenological approach. And there are some other papers that I'm referring in the subtitle about the methodology, but of course only if it's unique, only if it's unusual. The same applies with the country. If the country content is unusual. The main problem with the research I'm doing is mainly about Greece. The research I'm doing, most of you, is about India. The problem with these countries is that there are too many papers that are being published in the last years. And for this reason, it's getting more difficult to publish papers in good quality journals from Greece, that they have a case study of Greece or India, and of course several other countries. Although as an editor, if you receive a paper from countries that not much publications are taking place, you tend to give a chance for a review and so on. And for this reason, a lot of academics now, they try to do comparative studies. So instead of doing a research only about India, you can do a comparative study between India and any other country or region and so on. So your paper is getting more interesting. We'll continue now with the abstract. Yeah?
Professor, I'm sorry, I need to intervene in between. Can you please just move this video dialog box from the main screen? It is coming in between the
Sorry about
slides.
it. Many thanks for letting me know. Actually, I'm really bad with technology. I don't really like technology. That's why I'm not doing any research about technology, and most of my research is about ethnography and sociology. So about the abstract, there are specific criteria you have to follow. One of them is your abstract should be easy to read. Anybody who's going to read your abstract he needs to understand it very quick without any problems. Another issue is word count. Usually you have to look the submission guidelines of the journals. Most of the journals, the word count they accept is between 100 and 200 words. In the abstract, you need to include your research background, theory you draw on, if any, research gap, research aim question, research methods, results, theoretical and practical applications. And of course, this always depends on the word count. If it's short, it means that perhaps you are not able to cover everything. If it's longer, you have the chance to include more. Always you need to avoid abbreviations. Avoid references. Actually, in abstracts, you use references only if you are testing them in your research. Otherwise, never use any references. And also, in order to see how an abstract looks like, you need to find high-cited papers in your field to look their abstracts for ideas. Okay, so if you're writing a paper about IT and image, let's say, you try to find a paper that has published perhaps in the same journal you're planning to submit your paper, to have a broad idea how these abstracts are. So keywords, usually you need to make a list of keywords. Most of the journals, they say that they want between 6 and 10 keywords. And keywords are a mini version of the paper and either in the title and are either in the title or the abstract. You include key concepts, key methods, and reiterate keywords from the title in your abstract. So you continue with introduction. Introduction is a mini version of the paper which introduces the reader to your research field. You need to cover all the topics that you are going to address in your paper, starting with presenting an overview of current research on the subject, highlight the importance and make general statements about the topic. You need to formulate ideas, problems, research questions, aim, contribution, carefully describe which research gaps you plan to fill. This is very important because by identifying existing gaps, you are convincing the reader about the significance of your study. Of course, you have to describe shortly your methodology and important results, and you're going to end by giving a brief overview of the structure of the paper. And although there is no a specific rule about the word count, I would say that the maximum should be 15% of the word count of the manuscript. Although you can have shorter ones, you can see that very good publications, very good papers, they have 2 paragraphs, but maximum I would say 15% of the word count of the manuscript. So we'll continue now with the literature review. You need to make sure that it is focused on your key concepts and research questions. Again, you need to demonstrate how you fill a research gap. The most important, I would say, for the literature review is that you need to provide a systematic literature review. So you have to organize it either by content, by factors, by topic. And you need to cite all the literature review. It's not possible to cite all the literature on the subject. This means that you need to find the seminal ones, and you increase the credibility by using quotations from well-known scholars, seminal works. Of course, you don't need to overdone it, but some quotations are useful. About the methodology, you need to discuss in detail your methodology approach, how you select your sample, which research instrument you used, did you use questionnaire, are you going to do an interview, how you collect your data, did you go to a specific place, did you do it through email? Now with COVID-19, the last years, a lot of studies, they're taking place through the internet, by email, or online. How you analyze your data. If you are doing quantitative research, you need to use statistics. If you're doing qualitative research, you can do thematic analysis, content analysis, and so on. And another important issue is also ethics. Although when I did my PhD, and I would say 10 years ago, most of the papers did not mention anything about ethics. The last years, it is quite common to have the informed consent of your sample. And if you don't write anything about ethics, a lot of reviewers they are asking you when they're reviewing the papers. So research and discussion, you can have 2 separate sections or 1. Both of them are acceptable. The main idea when you present your results, it's not to be very descriptive. You need to be very analytical. As a reviewer and as an editor, one reason to reject a paper is if I see that a paper is based only on statistics without an in-depth analysis of them, or in the case of qualitative research, if it's only provides quotes without analyzing them in detail. Of course, you need to point out different relationships. You need to organize your results by research questions or hypotheses, stating the results of each one. There's there is a big problem with figures and tables, mainly when the papers are from scholars that they're not experienced enough. And the main problem is that almost all journals, they accept up to 7 figures and tables. So sometimes I receive papers that have 10, 15, 20 charts or tables, and this is too much. So make sure that you have the number of tables and figures that they are enough, they are necessary to analyze your data. Of course, mainly the discussion, it's very important to compare your results to those in the literature. Conclusion, you need to cover all the topics that have been included in your study. This means that you have to discuss, you have to provide a summary of the entire paper, contributions, to discuss the gap. Of course, you don't need to present anything new. If you provide something new, it has to be your proposals or your theoretical contribution implications for stakeholders, policymakers, managers, society, and so on. And at the end of the conclusion, most of the papers, they tend to include limitations as well as future priorities. Another section is the references. Try to use references that are up to date. They refer to core methodological publications. A major issue for authors that they're not experienced is that they use a lot of papers that they're not academic, internet sites, reports, and so on. Of course, you can use them, but you don't need to overdone it. Okay, you can use it, I would say, 1, 2, 3, no more than 3. The best is to use academic sources. When we're saying about academic sources, mainly articles published in good quality journals. Do not overdo self-citations. I would say that self-citations should not exceed 10% of all the references. For instance, if you have 40 references, only 4 of them can be self-citations. Very important is not only for the references, but for editing of the paper is to follow the submission guidelines of the journal you're considering. And it's quite common to include references from the journal you are targeting. I would say that when you are writing a paper, 3 sections are the most important: abstract, introduction, conclusion. And the reason for this is that a lot of editors, they tend to just reject the papers. This means that if you receive on a weekly basis, let's say 50 papers or even 20, it means that you don't have the time as an editor to read all of them. So the parts that you read are mainly abstract, introduction, and conclusion. Okay, the same is also with reviewers. As a reviewer, when I have a lot of papers to review, I'm not going to read the whole paper if I believe that does not have any potential. So I start with reading the abstract, introduction, conclusion, and if I believe that it has potential for publication, then I'm reading all the paper and I'm writing a detailed review. Also for readers. Readers, before they start reading the paper, they will read your abstract, your introduction, and if they believe that the paper is going to be helpful for them, interesting, then they're going to read the other sections. So now I'm going to continue the publishing process. It's quite important to find an interesting, innovative research area that generates new ideas. The problem with most papers that are being submitted is that they cite the same idea. So it's good if you find a unique topic. For instance, the last 3 years, my PhD was about community attitudes in tourism. But the last year, I'm not doing anything about this topic. And the main reason I'm not doing anything about this topic is that there are too many papers, there are too many PhDs, there are too many studies. So the topic is not of any interest anymore. My research currently is about degrowth. Degrowth in tourism. I've written a book also, a second guest edited book. Degrowth is not a topic that has been researched in tourism, so it's easier for me to publish a paper in this topic rather than the topics that they have been over-researched. Unless if you get an idea that has been published quite often, although you approach in a different way. International comparisons are very important. There are some 4-star journals that if you submit a paper that it's focused only in one country, in one city, they just reject it. So they require from you, if you have you are doing comparisons between 2 countries or more, co-authoring is very important, mainly if you are not experienced enough, so you can get the help from other authors who have more experience. Conduct research, this is very important. Write the paper, select the appropriate journal, and submit to a journal. So when you finish all the steps, we're going to the stage 1, that is submission. All the journals, they are specific submission guidelines. You have to follow the submission guidelines, and you submit it to the online submission journal. I'm giving you as a sample the online submission page of the Journal of Research, but all the journals, they have this online submission systems. So when, as an editor, I receive a submission, not only me, all the editors, I'm doing an initial screening, and usually what I'm looking is that the paper falls within the scope of the journal, follows submission guidelines, is appropriate of sufficient priority for further scientific review. If not, then the paper is rejected. If yes, then we continue with the review process, which means that I'm sending the paper to 2 to 3 experts for peer review. And all the journals, they have some specific evaluation criteria. These are the evaluation criteria of tourism policy. Most of the journals, they have similar criteria. I'm not going to go in detail of them, because these criteria have been covered, or they're going to be covered in the follow slides. So when the review gets the paper, it has mainly 4 options. Accept without changes. This is very rare. It happened to me only once when I submitted, I would say more than 20 years ago, in the Journal of Tourism Management. My paper was published without any changes. They revised only slightly the title. Most of the papers, if they are going to be accepted, they're going to be accepted with the subject to minor changes, or most of them subject to resubmission with significant changes. I'm going to go in detail later on, and usually the majority of papers that are being rejected, I would say that for high quality journals with a high impact factor, rejection is the norm. What, as an editor, I'm trying to do is to reduce the throughput time. For the National Journal of Tourism Policy is now 4.5 months, but always it depends on reviewers. There are some problems with the reviewers. They accept the review to review the paper, but following this, they forget to submit the review. You have to send the reminders, or even to replace them. Anyway, even if your paper has been rejected, it means that you can follow the comments as you go from the editor, and then you can submit it to another journal. This is the acceptance rate of international tourism policy. As you can see, in 2021 was around 14.4%, and this number, the acceptance rate is going to be reduced the next years, mainly because now the journal is well established. We receive a large number of papers, large number of manuscripts, so we can select the best one of them. The average is 25.61, but I would say that the next year is going to be around 10%. So rejection, as I've said earlier, rejection is the norm. Usually the good quality journals, they reject 90%. But even if your paper is rejected, the editor will tell you why. So this means that you can look through the comments, revise your paper, and submit to another journal. Of course, if your paper is rejected, there are various reasons. Three main reasons might be that the paper is not suited for journal. For instance, my journal is, one of my two journals is qualitative research in tourism. When you read the title, you understand that if you are doing quantitative research, you should not submit it to this journal. Okay. In any case, if you think that your paper is not suited for this journal, you can submit to another journal. If the paper has a lot of faults, it means that you need to take under consideration reviewers' comments and submit it to another journal. Paper quality, if your aim was in a very good journal that your paper is not good enough, it means that you need to choose a less prestigious journal. So if you're lucky and they ask you to revise and resubmit, the paper goes to two reviewers. The reviewer is going to send you their comments. You need to revise following all the comments and include a detailed document summarizing all the changes requested by reviewers and how you have changed your manuscript. There are some cases that you need to decline some comments for various reasons. One reason is that, let's say, the word count. My last submission in Journal of Hospitality Management, they asked me to include more and more theories, but there's a word count. The word count was 10,000 words, so if they asked me to include more theories, it means that the paper should be long. In any case, if you cannot address all the comments, politely you need to explain to the editor and the reviewers why you cannot. Also, there are cases where reviewers, they give conflicting opinions. One says something and the other says something the opposite. Again, you have to explain why you cannot, which of them of the comments is going to address and why. Of course, when you revise and submit, it's good to ask colleagues to read your paper. Mainly, they are more experienced. Now I'm going to discuss, I'm nearly finished, I'm going to discuss about the problems of submissions using some quotes from reviewers in my journal, the Journal of Tourism Policy. The first quote is from a reviewer that believed that his review was harsh and abrasive, and he sent me a confidential email. He told me that although my aim is not to discourage authors, this paper is a very poor quality. I don't see any chances of getting improved. So if you think that my review is harsh or abrasive, don't be offended to tone down some comments. Another review, and this is the case for inexperienced authors. This is the case, I think, that with a lot of papers that have been submitted to journals. I'm going to read this review. This paper appears to be based on a PhD. This is not bad. When I finished my PhD, also I published a lot of papers from my PhD, and that's what is being expected. When you complete your PhD, to write some papers and publish them in journals. The problem here is that the author seems to have almost no conception of how to write a formal academic paper. You finish a PhD, but this does not mean that you know how to write an academic paper, because writing a PhD and writing an academic paper is different. Okay, in a PhD you can write a long text. In a paper, you have very shortly to describe everything, to analyze everything, and so on. So according to this reviewer, this specific paper falls very far short of what is required in every capacity. While I feel that I could offer suggestions, cannot see how the paper could be improved. And he gives two suggestions to the author: to attend training and development sessions. If you are not experienced, it means that you can you can get ideas on writing academic papers by attending seminars. Seek advice and direction from her supervisors. Sometimes the problem with supervisors is that they're very busy. So if your supervisor cannot help you, this means that We can get help from colleagues or other experienced scholars. And another problem is plagiarism. Last week, I was just to finalize a book about tool development and planning in East Europe. And I had to use an anti-plagiarism program, an anti-plagiarism software. Most of the papers that did not have any problems. There was one paper that had a similarity index of 55%. Okay, this similarity index is really high, so this means that the paper is being rejected. There was another one that was 45%, but this was from the author's PhD. So, okay, nowadays editors do not accept to publish parts of your PhD, but since plagiarism was not from another author, I asked the author to revise the paper and resubmit it. In any case, cheating is unethical. So this was my presentation. This is my mail if you want to reach me. These are the two journals that I'm editing. I'm open to questions. Anything you would like to ask, I will be here.
Thank you, Professor. I'm sure our
My
participants
pleasure.
must have gained some knowledge and confidence to publish in high-quality journals, at least now. Indeed, a thought-provoking address, Professor. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. So before I take up the questions from the audience, I would request you all to please place your questions in the chat box. And meanwhile, while you are doing it or placing your question in the chat box, Professor, I have a very interesting question for you, as I am also following your footsteps of qualitative research. So a lot of time, India is gaining the momentum in qualitative research in recent years, it has been seen. However, presenting the findings and the discussion becomes a bit tricky. I mean, we cross the word limit count, which is expected by a particular journal, while we are, writing the qualitative research. So, could you please guide us on the same, how to approach while we are writing a qualitative research, writing a good discussion without crossing the word limit?
That's the main problem actually with qualitative papers. When I'm finishing qualitative paper, usually exceeds that word limit of most journals, that most of the journals accept up to 10,000 words. So you have to reduce the words, but it's easier to reduce the words than adding more. Honestly speaking, there's no specific rule about it. Okay. For me, the best is the conceptual framework. So I have a specific conceptual framework that I follow in each section. It starts from the introduction, continues with literature review, methodology, and results, and so on. So these conceptual frameworks give you some restrictions. Okay, this means that if you follow a specific framework, it means that you are not going to recycle ideas outside of this framework. So that's how I approach the word limit. Okay, I have a specific conceptual framework that I'm following it in each section.
Okay, all right. So I have a question from the audience. This is from Pradeep Kumar, and he's asking, working on previous idea, work, content come under theft or self-plagiarism?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. So Pradeep is asking to you, Professor, that working on previous idea or work or the same content come under the theft or self-plagiarism?
Sorry, a moment.
Am I audible to you,
Something's
Professor?
wrong with your I cannot hear you properly.
Okay. Am I
So
audible
let me
now?
see. Sorry?
Am I audible now?
I have a problem with the
You can
connection.
maybe you could stop presenting.
That's what I'm planning to do.
Yeah.
That's what I'm planning to do. Working on self-previous idea, work content come under theft or self-plagiarism. It's not bad to work on a self-previous idea, okay? Actually, if you see my published papers, I have more than 10 papers about community attitudes. But what you have to do is to approach them in a different way, okay? So for one of them, I used one theory called social exchange theory. For the other one, representation theory, negative bias theory. So the main focus of the paper are resident attitudes, but I was using different theoretical and conceptual frameworks. The problem of theft, of self-plagiarism, this is a main issue. All the journals now, all the good journals, for instance, when you submit a paper to my journal, I'm getting a similarity index. It means that the online submission system tests your paper for plagiarism. Okay, so before you submit the paper, what you can do, because some people, they do it without knowing it, they don't do it on purpose. You can use an anti-plagiarism program, I think that a software, I think that most of the journals now, they have these anti-plagiarism programs, softwares. So this means that you can check the paper. I would say that the percentage you expect is less than 22%. So if it's more than 22%, I would say if it's 25%, I'm going to make just a comment to the author to reduce the similarity index. If it's more than 35%, directly it's just rejected. Okay, I'm not going to continue it because as a journal, as a journal editor, I don't want to get blamed that I publish paper that they are plagiarized. But the authors, before they submit, they can do it on their own. They can use a software to find the percentage of plagiarism.
All right, Professor. My next question is related to your journal, International Journal of Tourism Policy.
I have a problem to listen to you, sorry. Can you repeat?
All right. Yes, Professor. Am I audible now?
I think it's better now, yeah?
Okay. So my question to you is, being the chief editor of the International Journal of Tourism Policy, what do you expect in the paper addressing emerging issues and producing policy implications? So what do you expect, how we should write it, the policy implications?
I think that it's not only for tourism policy. I think that all the journals expect to provide implications in your conclusion. And this is the main idea of a paper. When you're writing a paper and when somebody is reading it, he wants to understand your contribution, why you did it. So there are theoretical papers that they have theoretical contribution. Perhaps you provide a new theoretical framework, and there are practical papers that they have practical implications. The implication can be for decision makers, for marketing managers, and so on. So definitely you expect at least 1/3 of your conclusion to be about the implications of your study. Otherwise, if you don't provide any implication, it means that your paper does not have any value. And as I've told you earlier, when the editors and the reviewers they are looking at the papers, they look first the abstract, introduction, conclusion. So if they conclude they see that the paper has no implication, it means usually they think, why do I need to publish a paper like this? So the paper is just rejected.
So, Professor, one last question. This is from Sujud Khan. Why reviewers take so much time? Don't you think this much delay affect the novelty of the research?
The problem is that they don't always take much time, okay? From my experience, there are some reviewers that they send you only a short paragraph. So although they accept to review a paper, their comments are not constructive at all. And this is a problem that many editors they face. If I receive a review that they're very short and not constructive at all, it means that I have to find a new reviewer. Honestly speaking, the last years I'm not reviewing many papers. Okay, I would say that although previous year when I started my my career writing and editing journals, I used to accept at least 2 or 3 papers for review every month. Now I don't have enough time anymore. So I think that usually most of the reviewers are the young academics that they finished their PhD quite recently, and they want to use it in their career. Or they are editors of the journal, they are in the scientific committee of the journal, which means that it's part of their work. Okay, so one of the expectations of both of my journals is members of the scientific committee to review at least 3 papers a year. If not, this means that they are being to be removed from the editorial board of the journal. Okay, and of course, as an academic, you have friends or relatives. Sorry, not relatives. You have friends in academia, which means that you ask them a favor to review a paper. Okay, but the major problem that we face now as editors is that a lot of reviewers decline your invitation. And this is not only for journals that are not the top. I was an associate editor of journals for many years. The last years, I had to say 14 invitations in order to find 3 reviewers. Okay, so when I started being associate editor in Annals, always when I was sending review requests, always most of the time they accepted my invitation. The last years, this is not the case. So you have to send again to find more reviewers and so on. So this is the main problem that they face a lot of editors. However, there are journals that accept papers without review. And these are the journals that you have to avoid. I had an email from somebody who submitted in my journal of Qualitative Research in Tourism, that okay, I want to withdraw my paper because I submitted to another journal and it was published without sending me any comments. So what's the idea if you submit a paper and publish them in a journal that it's very poor quality and publish everything? Okay, you want to publish in a good journal, you want to get constructive reviews in order to improve your work and to correct your mistakes. That's the main idea of submitting a paper to a journal, and that's the main idea of reviews.
So we also have a lot of questions, Professor, but because of the time constraint, I guess I will be writing you an email with few more questions from my side to connect further. For now, let me put forth my sincere gratitude to you for enlightening us through your wisdom. Thank you so much, Professor.
My pleasure, and I hope that next year we're not going to have the restriction of pandemic, and I will be able to join the conference at your university. Okay, so
Definitely.
hopefully it will be possible to travel. I'm actually based in Greece the last 2 years because of the pandemic. I haven't traveled to any place, and I hope that when the pandemic ends, I will have the chance to visit your university. Thanks for everything, and congratulations for the very good organization of the conference.
Thank you so much.
Professor.
My pleasure.
And we are waiting for your arrival in India very soon. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
So with this, we come to the end of the second day of the conference. Over here, I humbly remind you all that we would be beginning our third day of the conference scheduled on January 30th, 2022. That is tomorrow. We would be having our parallel technical sessions, session 4 and technical session 5, commencing from 9:30 a.m. Indian Standard Time. I hope your session in charges and associate session in charges are in connect with you. In case of any confusion, please do not hesitate to approach them. Yes, we are done for the day. Thank you and have a great evening ahead. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.